The reason why I think the Bucks are winning in 6 games, why I think they are going to beat the Nets, is for 2 reasons, and they're both small things. These aren't, Giannis going off every game. This isn't, Kyrie struggling. It has nothing to do with really the big three. 2 small things that I think are going to be the reasons in the end that we look back and say, oh, that's why the Bucks won. Rebounding, defense. Bucks do both of those things really well. Nets do both of those things really poorly. It's not sexy. It's not something you'll read in a lot of previews. It's not something that we'll be really breaking down a ton leading into this series. But I do think because of rebounding, because of defense, the Bucks will win and beat the Nets in 6 games. And here's why. When we look at rebounding, I want to take a quick look back here at the Nets-Celtics series. The Celtics had really no size on the court. And despite that, they still were able to hang with the Nets in terms of rebounding, in terms of keeping their own on the glass. The Nets only out-rebounded the Celtics in the entire series by 1 rebound. But when you look at the offensive glass, this is really what I'm looking at here. This is really, to me, going to be a big factor. The Celtics, despite the fact that Robert Williams only played 46 minutes, one of the best big men, Tristan Thompson, Grant Williams. No offense to Grant Williams here. Grant Williams is the backup center for the Celtics. He is 6'6". 6'6". There's not much size on the Celtics team because of injuries, despite the fact that they had a 6'6" backup center on the court. The Celtics out-rebounded the Nets for the series on the offensive glass 63-52. Now, why is that important? Why are we talking about offensive rebounding in a massive series between the Bucks and the Nets? Because guess what? Offensive rebounding equals extra possessions, extra opportunities for the Bucks to score. What do we hear about with the Nets? Oh, man, defense doesn't matter. All that small stuff doesn't matter because the Nets, who's going to keep up with them? Who is going to score with the Nets? Well, guess what? When they are given extra possessions out, when you're giving the Bucks second chance opportunities on a regular basis, yeah, I think the Bucks are going to keep up with the Nets scoring-wise. I think they'll outscore them. Those extra possessions matter. And guess what? Not only is rebounding something the Nets don't do well, I think we'll come back to bite them in this series, rebounding is one of the best things Milwaukee does well. Celtics in the playoffs through 5 games were number 2 in offensive rebounds per game of all 16 teams. Number 2. Again, without having much size on the court. Number 2. Do you know who number 1 was? The Milwaukee Bucks, that's right. 15 offensive rebounds they averaged per game. 15 chances that they have to score second and third opportunity points, whether it's a 2, whether it's 3, whether it's getting to the line. They are dominant on the offensive glass. And not only do they get offensive rebounds themselves, they don't allow second chances for the Nets to have on the other end. Regular season, Milwaukee was number 1 in the NBA, the best team in the NBA in terms of defensive rebounding. In terms of total rebounding, number 2. Well, you know who's really struggled, especially on the offensive glass, who really struggles closing out and ending possessions after just one shot? The Brooklyn Nets. The Nets are tied for last in the regular season, not a small sample size of the playoffs in 5 games. The regular season, in 72 games, the Nets were tied for last in the NBA in terms of allowing the most second chance points. They were tied with the Pacers, on average per game, allowing the most second chance points in the NBA. So guess what? For all those naysayers picking the Nets to go to the finals, saying, Giannis, Embiid, whoever comes out of the West, it doesn't matter. No one's going to be able to score with KD, Kyrie, and Harden. You point to the big 3 scoring 100 points total combined in the series against the Celtics in 1 game. Awesome. Great. Guess what? The Bucks are going to have equal offensive success because the Nets are going to give them second and third chances. They are going to keep the Nets on the defensive side of the floor longer than Brooklyn wants to be. And speaking of defense, speaking of keeping the Nets on the defensive side, that brings me to point number 2. Because guess what? The Nets aren't a good defensive team at all. And defense does matter in the NBA.